Good morning, everybody. Kevin Baylor, CTO and Managing Partner here at Alliance IT. Hope everyone's doing well. And we're going to talk a little bit today more in depth on Microsoft Teams. Last week we touched a lot on the general use and some of the advanced features and add-ins of Teams. But today we want to dig a little bit more into meetings, live events, the administration, admin settings and policies in Teams, and touch slightly on security as well. So we'll get this show on the road. I'll open up the Q&A. If you've got any questions, post them, and we'll get them answered as soon as we can and to the best of our ability. And this will also be recorded as well, available probably in a couple of days on our YouTube channel. So just look up Alliance IT LLC on YouTube and you'll find us. And also last week's event as well is up there. So sit back, take some notes, and hope you get pick out a few nuggets that you can use in your day-to-day. Well, we've got Teams up and running here on the web interface. One of my favorite features we showed last week is the Power BI and all the fancy graphs that you can put into place. So in Teams, when you are managing your teams, depending on your rights, you will have a lot of capabilities in here with these. Simply going into managing the team as far as who is in that team, what rights they have in that team, and the channels that show up in that team as well. Not everyone may have access to all the channels. And the reason that you want to be aware of the settings and the privileges, because you don't want to have your organization be susceptible to any data loss, any AI information leakage. Thank you, Microsoft demo environment, for kicking me out. And we're back. So as I said, you want to be conscious of who can do what in the teams and in the channels. There's a lot of granularity you can get in here as well by using the mentions, what guests are allowed to do, even if you do allow guests or not. And again, this is something to be conscious of. If you're not a team admin, something you may want to go back and ask your team admin, your internal IT department, your IT company. Maybe this is something that you want to review. If you've got just a couple of teams, you probably don't have a lot of complexity, but if you're a larger organization and you're running multiple teams and multiple channels in those teams, you're posting Word and Excel files, which link back into SharePoint, you're utilizing Office 365 groups, there's a lot of back-end security and permissions that you want to be conscious of. Some analytics that you can go in and get some information, know how much is being shared out there, what apps they have linked. So again, this can become a fairly part-time position for a large organization with several teams. And we'll get back into some of the organization-wide settings here in a little bit that will help you control this from a top level down perspective. But while we're in the actual team interface, we've had some additional questions come up about meetings and the different types of meetings within Teams. Your Meet Now is fairly self-explanatory. It is basically going to create an on-demand meeting, very similar to Cisco WebEx or some of the other ones out there. So I've created a quick on-demand meeting. I can go up here and I can copy this link and I can send it to somebody. I can email it to them. Kind of what you see it looks like. You've got this link with a call-in number. all that information. So you quickly email it to them, team it to them, text it to them, however you want to get it to them. You could also call someone and invite them in. And what that's going to do, that's going to go ahead and call them. And if they accept, they are now going to be joined into the audio conference that you just created. So you don't have to have somebody with Teams on the other end to accomplish this. Now you do have to have a dialing plan, of course, to be allowed to dial out from Teams. That is additional licensing and cost, of course, but something that can be easily added in. So that's your Meet Now. Very quick and easy way to share screens, interact with one another, do some whiteboarding, get some collaboration going on at a moment's notice. If you're doing a basic new meeting, you know, we're just going to create a regular meeting. And let's see, Megan's available. We can invite Megan, and maybe we can invite Brian. And we also want to post it in a channel. So this might not necessarily invite them, but it's going to post it in the channel, letting that channel know that this is going on and give them the flexibility to join. So these individuals, Megan and Brian, are going to get an email going, hey, you've got a live event or a meeting coming up. Please join it. We'll have the information about it down here. We've got our time and date set. You can make it a reoccurring meeting, of course, if needed. And I'm going to go ahead and send that invite out. As you can see, it's on my calendar. And as we mentioned, we also posted it in the product team general channel. So that meeting invite is now down here as well. Anybody in this channel can see it. They can go into it, look at the details, find out the call-in information, join online, going through Teams, and seeing who the organizer and additional attendees are. So again, multiple ways to get information out to different teams, different individuals, whether they are interpersonal or outside your company. If I want to go in and edit this, it's easy. I just open it up. I edit it. If you're doing it in Outlook, you've got the plugin, you tell it it's a Teams meeting. If you're doing a meeting on your mobile phone in Outlook, you have an option to mark it as a Teams meeting, which creates it in Teams as well. Live event, which is what we're doing right now. This is used in multitude of ways, typically webinars, education moments, not necessarily for a team collaboration, but more of announcements, but really could be used for anything that you want. So we've got our live event that we want to create, when we're going to hold it, what it might be about. Now with these permissions, people in groups only, obviously you're going to specify who can see this. Organization-wide, anybody that's in your organization would have access to this. Now public, this is what we're doing right now. Wide open meeting. You could have signed in and when you joined this with your Microsoft information, or you could have joined anonymously. We do have those capabilities out there. And as you notice here, this is grayed out. And we'll touch on this a little bit later when we go in and we talk about some of the administration for Teams. We can record this. We can find out whether we get an engagement report. Kind of tells you, about the attendees, anonymous or if they signed in, gives you a little bit of information that they provided. Q&A session, you can have one or not. Of course, we always enable it because we want to get your feedback during the session and answer any questions you have. And if you're going to use an additional third-party tool, you can throw this in here as well, depending on, again, what permissions are allowed at your organizational level. And then I could schedule it, and then boom, would have a live event just like you guys are experiencing now. So those are some of the basic common ways to work meetings. As you can see, we've got all these other meetings out here. Again, depending on what your rights are, you may have the ability to, edit the meetings if somebody else made you a moderator. You can go in and you can take notes for this, which is going to link up into OneNote. You've got the whiteboard feature, which basically is just going to give you this whiteboard that allows you to draw and collaborate online, real time, sketching out designs or working through flowchart processes. If you've got a pen, obviously it's a lot easier to use. Otherwise you take the mouse and create your artwork. Let's see if we've got any questions right now at the moment out here. I don't see anything being published at the moment, so looks like we're good. Okay, all right, we'll move on here. So on the administration side of Teams, just like with all other Office 365 products, there's an admin panel. As you can see, the URL to Teams administration is very easy. Instead of teams.microsoft.com for the web app, we've got admin.teams.microsoft.com. If you haven't deployed Teams to your organization yet, they do provide you a decent rollout plan, project plan, that you can go through. It utilizes Planner. It creates different tasks. It puts it in phases as far as working with different groups. So if you haven't rolled out Teams yet, this is something that you definitely want to go through and look at, especially for larger organizations or multiple locations, where you're going to have business unit leaders creating different teams and channels and kind of managing some of that on their own. Pop over here and kind of follow up on our live event topic that we were just talking about. We've got this one global organization-wide policy. We're going to allow scheduling. So we're able to schedule a live event. It doesn't have to be done on demand. We are not providing the transcription for the attendees, but you do have the possibility to do that. And who can join these live events? And this is where we have that ability to control whether or not the public has access to attendees or not. And that's that everyone feature here. And who can record the event. Maybe it's just the presentator, or maybe you allow the moderators, or you don't want anything ever to be recorded. You can create multiple policies. You can manage who can control those policies. Maybe you want the R&D team not allowed to do live public events, but you want your sales team or your tech team to go out and be able to do live events. So you could create different policies to help control that. In your live event settings, again, depending on your organization, you may use a URL if somebody needs help or something like that. Or if you have Hive or some other provider that you're going to push that content out with, you can get that set up in here as well. And of course, you would have to have that provider's information to put in here. We simply record it, upload it to YouTube, and let the world have at it. All right. Organizational wide settings, which we wanted to touch at briefly when we opened this up. Currently, we allow external access. This is something that you can turn off, whether you want your organization to be allowed to talk to external users in different platforms. You can specify these domains. So if you have different domains within your organization, you could limit it to that. If you have a couple of key suppliers or clients or vendors or consultants that you work with, you could add these domains in here and narrow down who has external access. And again, these are organizational wide settings. It will apply to everyone, all teams, all channels across the board. Guest access. This is basically just anyone with an email address. Are you going to be able to reach out to them and invite them into a chat or into a team? And if you do enable guest access, this is where understanding some of the security and additional administration policies come into play. You want to know what they have access to. We want to make sure that we have the ability to collaborate freely and appropriately, yet we do not want to risk any data breaches, sharing of PHI, anything like that. So you can control what happens with guest access in here. Probably wouldn't want them to delete a sent message. You really care if they have GIFs and conversations, memes, why waste the time? Stickers. A lot of that stuff you probably really don't care that a guest has the ability to do. Meet now. You may not want guests to be able to do that on-demand meeting. So something that has to come from the top down in your organization and understand what each of these settings do and how it affects everyone. Your team settings. Again, these are organizational wide settings. It will affect every team out there. Now, there may be some additional team settings that will override or supersede these organizational wide settings. If the org wide settings are loose, then some team settings may be able to tighten that up. Such as, allowing users to send emails to channel addresses. If the team or channel address does not accept email at that level, then that's where that granular policy is going to override the organizational wide policy, because the org wide policy is more lax. Citrix, Dropbox, Box, Google Drive. Do you really want to be able to bring those additional storage options into Teams? Devices, you can control how the meetings operate on some of the devices. And there are several devices out there that are Teams capable. They're built around the Teams UC, whether it's a speakerphone, headsets, desk phones. There's a lot of devices that will integrate nicely with Teams on a fairly native basis. And this here is simply that if for some reason your organization or your tenant hasn't already been updated, you would see some additional things in here about getting it upgraded. But for the most part, Microsoft got that rolled out across the board to all tenants. And then coming down on a more granular level, this is where we get into overall administration of the teams that have been created within the organization. Privacy, some of them are public, some of them are private. Again, what's the difference? If a team is public, anyone can join it. If it's private, you've got to be invited to it. In your team's policies, again, here we have just one global organizational policy. You're allowed to do private teams and private channels. Locations, a lot of this gets more into tagging, network locations, some call routing if you have some of the business plan, call plans tied to it. Conference bridges, in voice, we're going to touch lightly on this. As of yesterday, April 1st, Microsoft Business Voice released, and there's been changes around that, but a lot of it is still applicable to Teams, or the way Teams has been changed as well, with some of the calling plans and pricing. So here we're listing all of our conference bridges because we do have the dialing plan enabled. If you don't have a dialing plan, you try to add a conference bridge number, it's not going to let you. You do have to have a dialing plan or an audio conferencing license enabled on this. Let's see, do I have that up here? Okay, quickly on the plans. Let's see. Yeah, our phone numbers. So audio conferencing is $4 per user. So if you only have 1 or 2 users that are going to create audio conferencing or do the meetings where you need audio conferencing, that's an easy controllable expense. If you do have a few dozen or 100 that may be doing audio conferencing, that is going to be a little bit of a greater cost to the business. So, and again, that's what allows you to have that phone number for that call-in capability, as opposed to just using the Teams app. And you can see here, we do have our single global policy as far as what can happen across all meetings. We may want to narrow this down to only allow to share a single application. Maybe we don't want to allow content sharing at all. We don't want anonymous people to start a meeting. And again, who do we want to allow into those meetings? But again, as you can see, there's different policies, what you can allow and not allow, restricting anonymous, not able to do live captions, but we are allowing chat. So create your policies and settings that fit your organization. And real briefly, we'll touch on the dial plans. Again, I don't want to get real in depth right now into using Teams as a phone system, but it is capable. There's a lot of SIP providers out there that you can tie into Teams, including our own Ring Authority. So you could essentially do away with your phone system and use Teams across the board. But that's for another day. And real briefly on the security, everything goes on in Teams ties back into your Microsoft 365 score. Remember, documents are posted in SharePoint. You've got apps that get added in. You've got OneNote that gets integrated in. So how all that is used does roll into your total Microsoft Secure score, and something that should be continually reviewed by management and your IT team to ensure that everything is falling in line, whether it's advanced threat protection, DLP, your data loss protection and policies. They all come together. It's one full ecosystem, and Teams is becoming more and more of that central hub that brings everything together, and if not managed properly, could let everything go out the door uncontrollably and potentially unnoticed. Make sure you understand it, or get with someone that does. Make sure you're following all your compliance rules, whether it's HIPAA, PHI, GDPR. All that comes into play, even within Teams. And with that, again, this kind of touches a little bit more on the Microsoft Teams. End-to-end communication and encryption in there. Article came out, I believe it was beginning of the week, day before yesterday maybe, where Elon Musk said company-wide, we are not using Zoom. There's no end-to-end encryption. People can hop in, hack into our video calls. So that tool has been nixed per Elon Musk. So if you're doing some basic calls, probably not a huge concern, but do be conscious of what the other applications out there, how they interact with one another, how the data is transmitted, and everything else. So a lot of important information in here. So make sure you do get with management and your IT team to understand the security of it. So again, appreciate everyone's time. Hopefully you found a couple little nuggets out of this that gave you a little more insight and either answered some questions or created some valuable questions you can take back to your team. Stay safe, everyone. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.